The rain started and didn't relent.
That's the top of a fire hydrant, so I'm guessing
Water levels rose and came into homes. Thousands came to the rescue in boats, helicopters, and high water vehicles. Last August, Hurricane Harvey settled over the Houston area, dumping an estimated 1 trillion gallons of water into Harris County. The damage alone pushed over $100 million. Businesses and schools shut down for days, weeks, or months. Some would never recover. To this day, Harvey is a story so many of us are still living.
Hurricane Harvey, the wrath and the recovery, is sponsored by Kroger. Kroger sponsors the Hurricane Tracker because we care about your safety. American Risk Insurance, large enough to compete, small enough to care. And Gary Green Real Estate, touching lives one home at a time.
Good evening. I'm Tim Heller. Hurricane Harvey wasn't supposed to be a major hurricane. Early forecast models showed the circulation crossing the Caribbean, tracking into Mexico and dissipating. But as is often the case, those early forecast models were wrong.
At first, Harvey was a weak tropical storm. The original circulation dissipated over the Caribbean Sea before reaching Mexico. For the next 3 days, the remnant storm drifted northwest into the Gulf of Mexico, where it encountered warm water and weak wind shear. Suddenly, Harvey redeveloped into a tropical storm on the morning of August 24th. Later that same day, it strengthened into a hurricane. And the next day, Harvey was upgraded to a major hurricane. Still looks like it'll be a Category 3 storm through much of the overnight hours. While the models were originally wrong about the forecast, there was growing concern that the models might be right about the track after landfall. They showed Harvey stalling over southeast Texas and dumping over 20, 30, 40 inches of rain.
Mandatory evacuations here.
The central Gulf Coast was preparing for hurricane winds and storm surge, while Houston and the Upper Coast was preparing for a major flood.
We'll have minimal effects of the hurricane, but we will have significant rain.
Less than 2 days after redeveloping in the central Gulf of Mexico, Harvey slammed into the central Texas coast with 130-mile-an-hour winds, a Category 4 hurricane.
The residents of Rockport, Texas, near Corpus Christi had little time to prepare. Despite a mandatory evacuation order, 3,000 to 4,000 residents stayed behind. Teresa Cipra and her husband stayed to care for her elderly mother in the rental homes they own in Rockport.
It was about 6:30. That's when the trees just started going crazy. That's when the trees were just laying sideways, it looked like.
Known for its abundance of trees, the Live Oak Peninsula of Texas bore the full wrath of Harvey's 150-mile-per-hour wind gusts.
After it got dark was when it just got scary, and after dark is when everything started happening. Started pretty much raining in the house because of the wind.
Teresa's house never made it into the calm eye, and because of Harvey's slow motion, Rockport endured a mind-boggling 13 straight hours of hurricane-force winds.
And after about 3 hours, I was like, my God, is this ever going to end?
You see where that pole is?
5 miles to her north, Robert Mitchell and his wife did catch a 45-minute break from the wind, tending to their ranch animals during the calm of the eye. When the winds returned, it all went downhill.
We felt it slide right over the house. The dog started screeching, making the weirdest screaming noises that I've ever heard come out of a dog. And the house cat started running around in circles, and then a back window broke out and it let all the pressure out. And the house shifted twice, and I looked at my wife and I said, hold on.
A tornado ripped the modular home from the ground, slamming it back down just before the storm surge tide arrived from Copano Bay.
And it was just chaos. The water came through the kitchen window, over her head, over her back, and hit the center island, and it brushed everything off, electronics, dogs, everything. And I did a backflip over the couch, and when I came back up, there was already almost waist-deep water in the house.
Robert managed to open the front door, allowing 5 feet of water to flow through as their house washed nearly 200 feet away.
When I walked outside, not even kidding, I had shorts and a towel around my neck, and I knew everything else was gone. 100% of everything. All of our clothes were underwater and mud.
Almost 30% of Rockport's homes and businesses were completely destroyed by Harvey. The entire infrastructure taken down in one night.
We lost water, sanitary sewer, electricity, landlines, cell phones, and internet all at once.
None of our family knew if we were dead or alive. They didn't know if we were okay.
These 3 brick walls that came crashing down one after another. This tornado came through this area while many people in this area were sleeping.
Harvey next set his sights on Houston. Strong winds and suspected tornadoes ripped through the west side of town. In areas, rain intensified, but some neighborhoods weren't heavily affected by Harvey.
So the sun came out beautiful and brilliant on Saturday. On Saturday it came out really nice, and we were like, wow, this is great. False sense of security.
For 16 years, Dawn Douglas and her late husband lived near Cypress Creek. The two weathered hurricanes and floods with no water ever getting inside their home.
I continued to have that thought that we're not going to flood until late in the afternoon.
So all that night when the rain was coming down, you guys were able to see where the water level was and how eerie that is, that it continued to rise and rise.
So we saw it start coming up our driveway, and even on tax day, it only went halfway. And I just had that feeling that we should at least prepare. I still didn't think it was going to come in the house.
The water came up through my shower with just this terrible, terrible odor. And I thought, okay, well, but that's just in the shower. And I hear from the front, Mama, it's in the front door. And I come back into my master bedroom and I see it coming in under the windows first. And I said, baby, it's back here too. We would come and look every once in a while and watch the water rising in our house and see things starting to shift maybe, or some things floating. So we knew we couldn't come downstairs, we couldn't get out. But then when we looked out the front windows, we saw we couldn't get out anyway because it was up almost to the top of the street sign, or 3/4 of the way up. So we knew we couldn't get out the front door.
We're facing a catastrophe that we haven't faced before. We have every single watershed, all 22 of our watersheds are over banks.
By Sunday afternoon, less than 24 hours after the heavy rain started, over 15 to 20 inches of rain had already fallen on the entire city of Houston. Every bayou was flooded and rising higher. Government agencies and first responders were overwhelmed. Desperate times call for desperate measures. With that in mind, Judge Ed Emmett made a bold request.
We have always been known as a community where neighbors help neighbors. So those of you who have boats and high water vehicles that can be used in neighborhoods to help move people out of harm's way, we need your help.
Across the border in Louisiana, a state ready to repay Houston for the kindness shown to Hurricane Katrina evacuees, an informal group of Good Samaritans hitched up their boats and headed west. The Cajun Navy, along with many volunteers from around Texas, pulled thousands of families from flooded homes and reminded all of us what can be accomplished if we work together.
The last thing I'd like to say, and I personally have experienced flooding before, and I'm talking directly to those of you who have water in your house. I know what you're going through. I know you're scared. I know you're panicked. I know you feel like in a desperation right now. But know that help is coming. Help will be there, and we will help bring all of this back after this is over.
These are their handprints from last August of how they got in the house to...
The Douglas family was fortunate. Church community and close friends came in a boat to their rescue.
And they pull up in the driveway with the boat. So I said, Lyndall, I have a garage door opener. Let me see if I can let you in with it. And I hit the garage door opener button and it works. And he had put his hands on the garage door to push it up, and the garage door, up it goes.
As they drove to drier land, Dawn was overwhelmed by the devastation.
For a long time, I didn't want to look, Colin. I just didn't want to see it. But I did. I lifted my head and started looking up, and all I could see was water everywhere off of 99. He got us to their home. We walk into their home, and I have this wonderful smell of pumpkin, and I think she was making something in the kitchen, and she said, his wife, Jessica, said, hey, there's hot showers upstairs, and you guys are going to stay with us. And at that point, this complete and total stranger, I literally, on her shoulders, just slumped and cried. Because it felt like the most wonderful, warm welcome. This room was carpeted, and I could see that...
What happened when Dawn and her family returned home? Their recovery story a little later. But next, the area of Houston that thought they survived Harvey until the release of water from West Houston reservoirs. That when Hurricane Harvey, the wrath and the recovery returns.
We have another whole batch of rain coming in from the southwest.
David and Jeanette Wagner were like many Houstonians, paying close attention to Harvey's track and the latest forecast, which called for several inches of rain. When they went to bed on Saturday night, they had no idea the kind of impact Harvey would make on their Meyerland neighborhood.
Our whole house has never flooded before, and so we weren't expecting it to flood, even though all the news was bad.
Once again, their streets filled with water, and the water began to invade their homes.
And at 8 o'clock in the morning, we came out, and the water was up to the doorstep. And that's the first time we realized that we were really going to flood.
Water entered the back door, and then the front door.
We said, well, we have to start saving some of our stuff. And that's when we started pulling rugs up and getting things off the floor. But there was so much to do and so little time.
Books, clothes, an antique chest. All their belongings moved to higher ground.
She brought it from Germany when she came here in 1857, and it's not in terribly good shape, but it's one of the few heirlooms that we have.
Meyerland residents for 23 years, this was the first time their home flooded.
We didn't flood the previous 2 years with the Tax Day flood or the Memorial Day flood. And we were certainly hoping for the best, but trying to be prepared for the worst.
That Sunday morning, their neighborhood was surrounded by water. Their home looked like lakefront property.
When we came out, the water was flowing backwards towards Bel Air from the Brace Bayou.
With the water continuing to pile up inside their home, they knew it was time to leave and get help.
So that's when we packed up a change of clothes, and we carried 2 water bottles, and we waded through the water to that, it's about the 5th house down.
That evening, the Wagners slept on the 2nd floor of their neighbor's house, not knowing how much more water they would find in their home.
And then the next morning we came back and the water had receded. There's no water in the house.
9 inches of water led to one big mess.
The real work was taking out all the wood floors, and we had debris, past the sidewalk, and there's just taking out wood floors just creates a lot of debris.
Furniture and valuables that could be salvaged were loaded up in a pod and taken to storage.
The Corps of Engineers started water releases from both attics in Barker yesterday. The intent is to maintain the ability to control releases.
Maria Sotolongo and her family lived in the Briar Hills neighborhood just east of Barker Dam and just south of Buffalo Bayou. They had never seen flooding in their area.
We didn't. I mean, the street always, because of the drainage, it does get with high levels of water. And there was, of course, as in a large part of Houston, water on the streets. It did not enter our homes, and we didn't have any problems.
As Harvey's torrential rains pounded Houston, Maria became uneasy and decided to evacuate.
Around 9 o'clock on Saturday night, we thought, we have 3 kids. This is not looking good. Never thinking about the releases, just thinking about the rain.
For the families that stayed, there was no sense of significant danger until it was too late.
I think that's the main problem with everything that happened. Had they given us some sort of warning, hey, we're going to do this, leave now. But I think that's where the discrepancy and all the controversy was. Should they leave? Should they not leave? It's mandatory. It's not mandatory. And then it was too late.
Sunday evening around midnight, the decision to release water from the Barker Reservoir was put into action. The release rate was much larger than at any time of the dam's 70-year history.
The Tax Day flood, 2016, was some of the greatest releases ever. And I believe the release rates in April 2016 were about 4,000 cubic feet per second. With Harvey, the maximum releases that can come out of both of those dams combined is 16,000 CFS.
Those record releases of floodwater into an already swollen Buffalo Bayou inundated Maria's neighborhood up to 6 feet in spots. Her street wasn't the only one to flood for the first time.
Obviously around the reservoirs, around Addicks and Barker, and the homes that are located within the flood pool, both in Harris and Fort Bend counties. Never before has have the reservoirs left government-owned land and backed up into those homes. Just to give you kind of some idea, about 80,000 of the homes that flooded in Harvey were outside the 100-year floodplain.
Where you're at, there was a wall.
And to make matters worse, Maria estimates about half of her neighbors didn't have flood insurance.
We didn't flood in those major storms. We didn't think we were ever going to flood, of course, and so we didn't think we needed it. Now, in hindsight, is it ridiculous? Should we have had it? Of course. All of Houston, is a bayou city. We should have insurance, but it was not required.
The waters would recede. What was left behind? We dig into how families sought to rebuild their homes and their lives. When Hurricane Harvey, the wrath and the recovery returns. "14 days after Maria Sotolongo and her family evacuated, they were finally able to return home. They were greeted by a water line that was 5 feet high and a stuck front door.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh no.
The sights and the smell inside their home brought tears to their eyes. The decision on what to do next was a tough one.
But after all the emotions and all the heartache and really then logically thinking about it, we were like, we just can't sell it. We're gonna take such a loss. Then we thought about raising it. Should we just go ahead and raise it about 4 or 5 feet? Extremely expensive, out of our budget. And then we thought, let's just tear it down and start from scratch. And again, that was not a possibility for us financially. We will change some of those.
The Sotolongos salvaged what they could from the frame and began rebuilding from there.
And so here we are over 8 months after Harvey, and we're still like this because it's just such a long process to figure out, what do we do? What do we do? And it's a very personal journey. Every family has had their own journey and their own decisions to make.
In the months since Harvey, flooded families had to choose: renovate, rebuild, or sell and move somewhere else.
See, they've got all their tools in here.
The Wagner family decided they were going to rebuild. They felt fortunate.
We were really pretty lucky because we have a place to stay with our daughter, and other people are having to rent and they're running out of money, and we don't have that problem.
David and Jeanette returned to their home in mid-April with most of the repairs complete.
I think this part's got another month to go, and then we should be done. The rest of it's in pretty good shape.
The recovery and rebuilding from Harvey hasn't been easy for them, but David says he and his wife are glad they decided to stay.
Get another 10 years living here, that would be good.
These cabinets were built.
Now the Douglases needed help. Several volunteers came to their aid to rebuild a full house from what felt empty with Harvey.
Every range and age were here. They were out on the front yard. Everyone was having a blast, throwing things on a pile that was disgusting, like, yeah, grab that. And so we were falling all over each other.
In Rockport, where Hurricane Harvey made landfall, hundreds of businesses are back up and running, thanks in no small part to thousands of volunteers arriving from all over the country.
We had the Amish come in from Pennsylvania, and they built my bar. Amazing volunteers that I would never have had the opportunity probably to know, but have so blessed my life.
Michelle McMahon's coffee shop sustained significant damage from Harvey, but her business partner next door lost everything.
So this slab of concrete is where your art gallery once stood.
It might not look like it today, but yes, that's exactly right.
John Martell couldn't believe his eyes when he first checked up on his neighboring art gallery.
From here in, the walls, the glass, the doors, the roof, everything was crashed down here. And then everything in there was pulled off the walls, buried in concrete and all sorts of debris.
A church group from San Antonio showed up unannounced and hauled away the debris. Then Michelle offered up half her coffee shop to be converted into a new art gallery. John now finds a deeper meaning in the post-Harvey photographs he proudly displays.
To me and to a lot of other people, it says the following: hey, we had a tragedy, And let's, as American, let's all pull together. I don't care if I know your name. I don't need to know your name. I want to help you. And I don't want thanks. My thanks is that I'm going to make things a little bit better for you, and then I'm going to go down the road and help somebody else.
And because of that help, this tourist town is open again for business.
Come visit Rockport. It's a beautiful place. I've always said it's a beautiful place to visit, but it's a beautiful place to live as well. And we still have the best beach, and the best views, and the best fishing, and the best coffee.
How devastating was Harvey? We have the numbers. And we go back 10 years to the last hurricane to directly hit our area, Ike. That when we return.
Hurricane Harvey, the Wrath and the Recovery, is sponsored by Kroger. Kroger sponsors the Hurricane Tracker because we care about your safety. American Risk Insurance, large enough to compete, small enough to care. And Gary Green Real Estate, touching lives one home at a time.
In all, Hurricane Harvey flooded hundreds of thousands of homes, causing an estimated $125 billion in damage. But every storm is different. 10 years ago, Hurricane Ike headed toward the Texas coast. In Galveston, 24 hours ahead of landfall, Ike was already assaulting the seawall. At 2:10 a.m. Saturday, September 13, 2008, the Eye of Ike made landfall near Stewart Beach on the east end of Galveston Island. A 15 to 20 foot storm surge washed away entire neighborhoods on Bolivar Peninsula. Galveston Island was flooded with 8 to 10 feet of seawater. 13 people died in the storm surge in Galveston and Chambers County. Winds were measured between 80 and 110 miles per hour, from the coast all the way to Houston, taking out trees, power lines, and smashing out windows in the skyscrapers downtown. In all, Hurricane Ike produced $35 billion in damage. It is the 6th costliest hurricane on record. Hurricanes and tropical storms are very different. Most of the damage from hurricanes is from the storm surge and high winds. Most of the damage from tropical storms is from heavy rain and flooding.
Our location along the Gulf Coast means periodically we will be threatened by both types of storms. We can't change that. But what we can change is how we prepare before and react during and after the storm. Stay with ABC 13. We're keeping our eye on the Gulf.